Hello, and welcome to Snacks from the Stacks. My name is Eric Ensley, and I am the newly appointed curator of rare books and maps and special collections at the University of Iowa.
And I am Meredith Ringel-Ensley, and I have a doctorate in medieval literature.
And we wanted to welcome you to our home as we have a dueling battle in which I will be cooking a cheap plum cake.
And I will be cooking a good plum cake.
So these two recipes come from our Szathmary collection of culinary books, which is one of the largest culinary collections in the United States and just filled with absolutely wonderful printed books and manuscripts. And the book from which it comes is Anne Kenrick's 1770 cookbook. This book is really fascinating. We label it 1770, but the issue with it is that we have notes in this book that go back to 1701, 1702, 1703. So, interestingly, where the recipes start, when you start flipping through it and you get towards the end, the book inverts. So it turns over and it becomes a earlier, 70 years earlier or so, receipt book where somebody was writing down account balances and that sort of thing. Now, what's really cool about this book, we did some research on it, the two of us, and we found notes about where this book came from, which is not yet in our catalog record. It appears that it may have come from around Bristol, is what the account balances suggest, town of Tewkesbury, which is a few miles north. And it really tells us a story about Bristol being involved in the transatlantic trade. Now, this actually has some really upsetting and really tragic and terrible tendrils that will go out that we'll talk about later, how Bristol is involved in the transatlantic trade. But for now, we're going to stick to plum cakes. What's really fascinating about this recipe is that whoever wrote this down, it may have been Anne Kenrick, it may have been another person, decided to put two plum cake recipes on the same page. One is for a good plum cake, which Meredith will be making. The other is for a cheap plum cake. Now, I think Meredith is going to talk a little bit about why this may have been a cheap plum cake and why the other one may have been a good plum cake, but it also feeds into issues of the transatlantic trade, what was valuable at the time, what was not valuable, and what you could make for cheap.
All right, yeah. So, fruitcake. There are no plums in this plum cake. It is a fruit cake. A fruit cake has been a thing since the Middle Ages, also Roman times as well, all through the way through the classical period, up until the thing that you are supposed to throw at a wall at Christmas time today. And as fruitcake evolved through the centuries and millennia, it became richer. It especially became a richer cake once you hit that point where the transatlantic trade developed. What happens is sugar becomes cheaper, fruit becomes cheaper, sugar with which to candy fruit and preserve it becomes cheaper. Things like spices, ginger, all that sort of stuff. They become much more accessible. That said, they're still more expensive than a lot of other things. So the difference between a good plum cake and a cheap plum cake is really in the amount of sugar that the good plum cake uses. It uses more. It uses candied citron, which I believe yours does not, right? Nope. It uses almonds. Yours doesn't use almonds, does it?
Nope.
I don't think, yeah. So basically there's just a lot more stuff that would have been more expensive in the good plum cake. Welcome to our kitchen. We have all of the ingredients here for a good plum cake. The recipe I'm going to follow, we have transcribed it from the manuscript. The other thing to note about it is that we have massively reduced the size. We have divided it into 6. What we have here, we have 1 pound of flour. We have 0.85 pounds of, well, they were supposed to be currants, but currants weren't available, so we went with kind of this mixture of raisins and some tart dried cherries. Currants have a little bit more of a tartar flavor than raisins do, so we decided to go with a mixture. We have 1/6 of a pound of sugar. The original recipe called for a 1/2 ounce of cloves. We just went with a very small amount of cloves. Same thing with nutmeg, which is also in here, just a really, really tiny amount of nutmeg. We have some candied citron. Citron actually is its own fruit. It is like a very thick-skinned lemon, not available currently in your local grocery store. So we decided to go with a mixture of candied lemon and orange peel. The original recipe was half a pound of almonds. We have 0.09 pounds of almonds over here. We do have rose water, cream, 2 pounds of butter is now 0.34 pounds of butter. 14 eggs and 6 yolks got reduced to 1 yolk and 3 eggs. Now here's some of the more interesting stuff. The recipe calls for a half pint of sack, which is in our measurements about 3 tablespoons. Sack is interesting. Sack is sherry. Sherry was traded between England and Spain primarily, and we actually have a note from the 14th century that Geoffrey Chaucer, who was a customs agent at the time, received a butt of sack. And that is, butt is a measurement, and that is, interestingly enough, the phrase where a buttload comes from. The other thing the recipe calls for is a quart of ale yeast, because yeast, of course, is used still in brewing beer. Ale yeast is not what it once was. We're using a combination of modern baker's yeast, and then to make up the liquid, we're adding some amber ale to the recipe. Okay, so we have our pre-measured flour here with the raisins, our pre-measured spice. We're adding and mix it all together. Okay, we can do this. So I think it would probably make sense to start my heavy cream boiling. We reduce that to 2/3 of a cup. So while I'm waiting for my cream to boil, I am going to go ahead and make the yeast mixture. 2/3 of a cup of ale yeast, where I'm going to substitute 2/3 of a cup of amber ale. In the meantime, I'm thinking that I'll probably add, given that that's 3 1/3 cups of flour approximately, I'm gonna take my best guess, and I'm gonna add 2 teaspoons of modern day baker's yeast to that. Okay, well in any case, while that settles, I'm going to go ahead and melt this butter. It says slice the butter in, but I imagine it doesn't need to be sliced. I want to activate the yeast, so I think I'm going to give the sherry maybe like 5 to 10 seconds in the microwave. 3 tablespoons of sherry. Maybe like 7 seconds is probably gonna be enough. Put in your almonds, your eggs, yeast, sack, cream, and butter. So I guess then, yeah, the next thing you do is you just sort of mix everything all together in here. So let's go first with the almonds and the rose water, since I have that handy. It doesn't say what order to put them in, so I'm just going to take my best guess. And then eggs. You guys are also pretty handy right over here. Shoot. Oh, that's okay. That's not too bad.
It smells like grandma's house in here with all that rose water.
The rose water. It smells like soap. It really just smells like rose soap. I'm hoping it doesn't taste like soap. I'm going to add, yeah, the butter's all melted. Get this going in here. It would be a good thing to turn the stove off. All right, and then of course the last thing we need to add, and then I'll really mix it well, is the yeast mixture. Okay. Yep. Good. All the yeast went in. This is a really upsetting color. This is a really upsetting batter, a really upsetting color, and a really upsetting smell.
What we have here is the color of historical accuracy.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna call it. This is the scent of historical accuracy. Anyway, here we have our good plum cake batter. Oh, we're gonna need to wait a while now. It says let it rise by the fire an hour and let it stand in the oven 3 hours. Okay, proofing jar it is. Here you go. I'll see you in an hour. 1 hour later, we are going to see how it looks in the proofing jar. Okay, this is actually looking pretty good. I hope you can hear this as well as I can. What a noise.
It is fizzing.
It is fizzing like a something. This is a wacky smell, guys. It's like the Macy's perfume counter if they all went out and got real hammered at a bar somewhere. So we have set the oven to 350, and even though it says let it stand in the oven 3 hours, we're going to cut it down to about an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes, depending on when a toothpick comes out clean. It's been an hour, and we are going to see how this looks. Smells delicious, actually, despite its funky smell as it originally went in.